The hot new candidate on Colorado's Democratic presidential ballot is not named Biden. In fact, the candidate isn't named anything. A town in our state says it is done with remote public comments. It doesn't want to get swamped with anti-Semitism like other places. They have loved this land for 25 years, but it belongs to the state, so now they have to go.
It's a huge shock, and, the end of something monumental in our life had just happened.
And bringing much-needed veterinary care to the animals of the tribal lands in southwest Colorado. We won't just talk about it. Together, we'll make it happen, because this is next.
Non-committed, like that significant other that you had for a while, then didn't anymore. Non-committed, the strange new choice on some presidential primary ballots in Colorado this year. Enough of you have asked about it. Politics guy Marshall Zellinger figured he should explain.
Presidential primaries are not winner-take-all. Whoever finishes first on the Democratic ballot and Republican ballot do not necessarily win the support of all of Colorado.
We have our delegate selection plan on our website, and it's a very public process. That said, it is really complicated and confusing.
Shad Mirab is the chair of the Colorado Democratic Party, which has 87 delegates that will go to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago this summer to pick the Democratic nominee for president. Whoever finishes first among these candidates on March 5th will not be guaranteed all 87 delegates.
If any candidate receives 15% of a threshold of the presidential primary vote, they earn a delegate of one of our 87 delegates to go to Chicago to nominate our candidate for the president.
That includes the name on the bottom, non-committed delegate. That option got Christine in Fort Collins to email us wanting to know if there's a benefit to voting for sending someone non-committed to the national convention.
Non-committed delegate is actually a choice. It doesn't mean none of the above or anything like that.
If non-committed delegate gets 15% or more in Colorado's primary, Colorado Democrats will send delegates to the national convention to cast a vote for literally no one. At least the first time around.
They're not necessarily casting a protest vote against the president. They're actually sending a choice for a non-committed delegate to then make their choice of the remaining candidates at the Chicago convention.
If there are multiple votes, the non-committed delegate can choose whomever they want to support. I'd like to tell you that the instructions that arrive with your ballot explain this process, and that you're not voting for one overall winner, but rather how to divvy up delegates and who they support. But the ballot instructions in any county are not that specific.
It's certainly something to think about, especially as we continue the system.
The Republican Party ballot will also divvy up 37 delegates based on who wins with the final results, based on the count, and that includes candidates who have dropped out because they have not filed withdrawal paperwork in Colorado. So county clerks will be counting votes for Vivek Ramaswamy, Asa Hutchinson, Ron DeSantis, and Chris Christie. Even though they're not running anymore, I'm going to turn it this way. I should have done it from the start. Even though they're not running anymore, Kyle, if those people get enough percentage based on the Republican Party rules, which I'm not sure if it's 15% or 20% right now, they could get delegates sent to Milwaukee, where the Republicans are having their national convention, assuming that the Colorado Republican Party doesn't change their rules by then. So the head of the Colorado Democratic Party says that voting for non-committed is not a protest vote against Biden. But with all respect to him, it is whatever people want it to be. It's their ballot. They interpret how they want to do it. So some people might be checking that box because they don't believe in Biden. Some people might be doing it as a strategic thing. They don't really know. Right. I think he did say that. He also wants to point out it's not none of the above. It means whoever you're feeling for that moment, whatever the atmosphere is come August, maybe something happens and you want to be loosey-goosey about who you're voting for. Or maybe you've learned something more and it's like, you know what, I am a Biden supporter now and I can do that because whatever. He also thinks it's only going to go one round, so the non-committed will just be non-committed and not have a say after the first round, and then suddenly you've got nominee Biden. It reminds me of those bumper stickers that we used to see that would say, like, any functioning adult 2024, you know, it kind of reminds me of that. Marshall, thank you. The town of Castle Rock is taking a preemptive measure to avoid getting its meetings taken over by anti-Jewish hate. One community after another in Colorado has been caught flat-footed as remote commenters come in and flood the lines with anti-Semitism. So Castle Rock's going to make people start showing up for public comment in person.
Since November, council meetings in Wheat Ridge, Durango, and Lakewood have been hijacked by an online group that organizes anti-Semitic takeovers of remote public comment sessions. They spew the most vile, disgusting stuff you can imagine. It's not subtle, we'll say that. The Anti-Defamation League has tracked 140 of these incidents since last summer. Even as this has become more common, it's been reported on in a number of places, including this program. We've watched as municipal leaders appear unprepared when it starts happening. Take Lakewood recently. So last night, Castle Rock Town Council decided they would act first.
I would much rather be proactive than reactive in a situation like this, because I feel like it's a little bit like shame on us when we see the writing on the wall.
Castle Rock appears to be the first town in Colorado to shut down remote public comments in an effort to head off an anti-Semitic takeover. Meanwhile, Democrats in the Colorado House have introduced a bill that would require remote public comment. They say it's an accessibility issue. A quick recommendation on this topic, a deeper conversation I had recently on how local governments are handling hate speech at public meetings. It was on the Progressive Politics podcast, Get More Smarter. The hosts and I talked about how Lakewood struggled with the anti-Semitic public comment takeover and how the town is also dealing with misinformation about migrants. We have a link to that conversation in the pod in the next section of 9news.com. If you have a few thousand acres of land available, there's a family and 1,500 head of cattle looking for a new place to live. The land they loved for decades was leased from the state, which has decided to lease that ranch to someone else for more money. Our Mark Salinger takes us to rural El Paso County.
I don't know, it's just humbling to be able to be outside in a landscape as beautiful as this.
For nearly as far as the eye can see, Duke Phillips III looks out over his home.
It's amazing how beautiful it is.
86,000 acres, home to countless birds, 1,500 head of cattle, and for the past 24 years, the Phillips family.
It's always felt like a forever home.
There's sand dunes out east. There's a creek that goes the whole length of the ranch.
Tess and Duke IV moved here when they were 13 and 11. The family knows this year will be their last at the Chico Basin Ranch, southeast of Colorado Springs.
We don't have an option to stay. We don't have any other option besides leaving, really.
It was a 25-year lease that is ending at the end of this year.
In 1999, Duke signed a lease with the State Land Board. For more than 2 decades, they've cared for this land, ranching here while also opening it up to bird watchers, artists, school children, and their entire community. They focused on conservation. They thought they'd be here forever.
Yeah, never thought about leaving, for sure. You never really thought about it.
The State Land Board awarded the new lease to a different family.
The only thing that could knock us out was someone coming in and bidding a huge number, which actually is what happened.
Just going to draw a guideline first.
Every part of the ranch will now move. Destination unknown.
When you pour yourself into a place like that, you can't help but kind of develop a special connection with it.
Madison Phillips and the family are looking for a ranch big enough for everything from their leather shop
We're all just here to help each other.
to their cattle. It will likely force them to move out of state.
It is, a part of us that we're leaving behind.
While we don't have anything yet, we're optimistic that something will come through.
The Phillips family will be moving out. There's no stopping that.
We do feel really excited about what's to come next, and I'm to a place now where I'm able to kind of rest in that energy as opposed to the sadness.
They hope they leave a legacy of sharing their home with a community that loves it as much as them.
We're very thankful to have been here, and it's been a dream come true for us, really.
The State Land Board has the power to award these leases to whichever bid they choose, focusing on both money and also conservation. The Phillipses said they put so much emphasis on opening the land to the community and conserving the natural beauty of the ranch that they had hoped that they'd be awarded this lease yet again. They say they had a provision in that lease that if both parties were happy with how the lease was going, they'd be able to keep the ranch. Instead, they said that the board went with the more lucrative offer.
Because there wasn't a suggestion that they were not good caretakers of the land or anything like that.
Yeah, as far as we know, we said the state says that they were good stewards of the land. Now the question becomes, where do they go? I mean, you have 86,000 acres is what they have right now, 15 head of cattle. You can't just move in down the street. You can't go on Zillow and say, hey, where's the nearest place that can fit all that?
Yeah, bedrooms. You put 1,500 head of cattle. That's going to take most properties out. Well, it's a shame to lose them in our state if they've cared for that land so well. Mark, thank you for that story. Res Dog Rescue saves homeless pets from the Four Corners region and often helps them to find homes here on the Front Range. And that nonprofit also supports communities in southwestern Colorado to help pets stay with their people there. This week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign supports the nonprofit's work on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation. Res Dog Rescue is currently raising money for 2 vet clinics on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation this year, April and October. They did one last year in Toyac, and it was incredibly popular with the community. They offered spay and neuter, vaccinations, surgeries, whatever the animals needed for whatever the families could pay, even if that was nothing. The nonprofit found that many families had 5, 6 animals, and that made the cost of vet care really difficult. And then there are also the community animals down there that roam around town and are taken care of by a number of people, but they often had unmet medical needs. And then there were the dozens of animals that were brought in as strays or were surrendered so that Res Dog could bring them up to the Front Range to find forever homes. Outside of these clinics, they do a lot of this work on a constant basis, spaying and neutering thousands of pets a year, transporting more than 1,000 animals up from the Four Corners region to be adopted. So let's help them out. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word thanks to 303-871-1491 to get that link to donate to Res Dog Animal Rescue. I'll never ask you to give to a cause I don't support myself, and you've proven that even $5 adds up quick, so I'll match the first 50 donations of $5. Almost 1,500 of you have signed up so far to simplify your monthly giving. With a donation to the Word of Thanks Fund, you input your info once, and a monthly donation will be split among every nonprofit we support together. Makes it a little bit easier. You can use that same QR code or text to get there.
It's kind of the spiritual part for me, that somebody would violate this thing for what?
For what? Why? Why would somebody make off with pieces of Denver's memorial to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? The artist who made it says repairing it is easier said than done. The Supreme Court is considering an appeal of federal pollution guidelines. Could be bad news for Coloradans downwind of polluters. Next. The conservative majority on the Supreme Court appears skeptical of an EPA rule that cracks down on pollution that goes across state lines. That could be a setback to Colorado's effort to hold Utah accountable for their dirty business in our air. The court's considering a request to postpone the EPA's Good Neighbor rules. They require states to mitigate the pollution that they send downwind to other states. A handful of states are suing to block the rule. Today, conservative justices called the validity of the rule into question. They pointed to federal court rulings blocking it in at least 12 states, including Utah. The EPA ruled last year that Utah's coal plants and oil and gas companies are contributing to Colorado's ozone pollution, making it harder for our state to meet federal air quality standards. If the Supreme Court upholds the EPA rules, it would require states like Utah to make expensive emissions cuts. If the Supreme Court overturns the EPA rule, each state would set the rules for its own sent out-of-state pollution. Changes on the way after a warm day today. Kathy Sayre?
That's right. We had a windy day with temperatures above average again, upper 50s, low 60s, and eventually there's going to be a little rain and snow that moves off the foothills into the metro area. The sun is setting and the wind is starting to ease just a bit. We had a red flag warning posted for east central and southeastern Colorado. And with that system rolling through, we'll still have concerns for high fire danger as temperatures soared into the 70s there today. Your weather headlines, there's a winter weather advisory out for accumulating snow in the mountains. We'll see occasional rain showers down here, maybe a rumble of thunder, and as much as 4 to 6 inches of additional snow in the winter weather advisory area that covers Steamboat Springs, Rabbit Ears Pass, and the Park Range. We'll see the best accumulation above 7,000 feet, but can't rule out a brief rain or snow shower right here in Denver overnight tonight or early tomorrow. The showers will move from the northwest to the southeast, really won't linger all that long. They'll move out pretty quickly, and temperatures tomorrow will be a whole lot cooler than the readings that we've been enjoying all week long. And so we'll see maybe a little bit of snow in some of the foothill areas. Temperatures tonight tumbling into the 30s by about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Beautiful conditions as we look outside over downtown Denver this hour, but we will have some bigger changes coming up next week.
After 20 years, RTD's got a whole lot of nothing to show for its promises to build a train to Longmont. Now they say the key to making it happen is to think even bigger. And it could be a long road to repairing Denver's memorial to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Vandals ripped it apart last night. Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, RTD's train to Longmont, things that do not exist. Latest estimate is that 20 years after RTD promised that train, it could be another 20 years before it happens. But a new proposal suggests the state could speed up construction by expanding that line clear up to Fort Collins. Despite collecting taxes to pay for the commuter fast tracks project since 2004, RTD says the project is still underfunded. In a proposal released this week, RTD and the State Department of Transportation suggest tapping into additional funding by linking the Longmont train to a much larger project, the Front Range Passenger Rail, which is supposed to go Fort Collins to Pueblo. That project is eligible for way more federal funding because it's intercity passenger rail instead of just commuter rail. The new proposal suggests combining the two projects, so connecting Denver, Boulder, and Longmont up to Fort Collins, then building out the rest of the Front Range rail line to Pueblo. Denver police say they're investigating whether damage to the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. statue in City Park overnight was a hate crime or vandalism. The damage was all to the base of the statue. The president of the Martin Luther King Holiday Commission, which helped manage the statue's installation 20 years ago, says somebody ripped a unity torch off the base and took a panel honoring African-American veterans. He estimates the repairs could cost $75,000 to $100,000. Making things more complicated, the famous sculptor behind the piece, Ed Dwight, he's now 90. He admits that his vision is not great and also that the molds to redo the project don't exist anymore.
I can't see anymore. Finding an artist that can replicate this the way I had it done, it's going to be a little bit difficult.
If it was a hate crime, if you did it because you were trying to slow us down or stop us from doing things, it's not going to happen. We're going to still work for voting rights. We're going to still work for human rights.
Dwight has designed more than 130 memorials across the U.S. For whatever reason, whether it's hate or boredom or people stealing scrap metal, he says that dozens of his works have been vandalized over the years. Back here with your feedback next. Each year, thousands or more dogs and cats are brought up from tribal reservations in the Four Corners region to be adopted on the Front Range. It's the mission of the nonprofit ResDog. But that nonprofit also works to keep pets with their people in the Four Corners as well. This week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign supports ResDog's vet clinics on the Ute Mountain Ute Reservation. They offer surgeries, spay and neuter, vaccinations, free pet food. It's also a chance for stray animals or pets that are being surrendered to be brought up to the Front Range to be adopted into forever families. Scan the QR code on your screen or text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491 to join me in giving to support their work. You'll see an option there to give just this week to ResDog or to make things simpler if you want to support all of our Word of Thanks nonprofits through a monthly donation to the Word of Thanks Fund. A note that came in via email from somebody said, I want to thank you for supporting ResDog Rescue in southwestern Colorado. Particularly want to thank you for pronouncing Toyac correctly. Not terribly surprised, the emailer says, because I've heard you properly pronounce Ure. Try our best. We don't get them all right, but we do try to get them right as often as we can. Speaking of things that we get wrong from time to time, this from Frank. Hey, Kyle, I had a double-breasted suit 50 years ago. Well, congratulations, Frank. It sounds like you were a pioneer. See you next time.